Mindfulness is one of the top tools in my own practice of how to handle life, basically. It's been super helpful in my recovery from eating disorder, from trauma, and it can be a very scary thing to start. And I'm going to talk today about how to incorporate little tiny mindfulness moments in your day. So it doesn't really take much time. Welcome back. This is Rebel Movement Podcast. My name is Billie. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her. I teach anti diet, trauma informed, queer safe yoga, mobility, mindfulness, and workout classes online and in person in the Prince Edward County area. And I do one on ones to help people heal their relationship with their bodies and movement practices after a lifetime of diet culture bullshit. I've been practicing mindfulness for quite a long time now. I don't even remember when. I think it was back in college, which was, I don't want to figure out that math. A long time ago, it feels like. And I actually started it in a group therapy thing, which was like changed my life for the better. And um, we did different types of mindfulness in that group, not just like mindful meditations. And of course, I've done a lot of mindfulness since within my yoga practice and since becoming a teacher and also again in therapy, and it's been one of the most helpful tools. Like that part of yoga is the part to me that has made the most difference in my life. That part of the practice it's changed my life forever, and I wanted to help give a couple of tools or little ways you can incorporate it into your life that are not so scary. If you've never heard of mindfulness before, the way that I um like to explain it, as I'm not like a certified teacher in mindfulness or anything. I'm just a person who's been practicing it for like 20 years. I imagine that you are trying to explain. Actually, let's use a more specific example. Okay. Let's pay attention for a minute to the sounds you hear around you. And the temptation when you're thinking about the sounds, if you were trying to describe it to me, is to say things like, "Oh, I heard a door. I heard a sound of a car." But that's talking about what the sound is, not like what's making the sound, not what the sound sounds like. So you might say, "Oh, there was a creak, and there was a rumble, or there was a um, low, deep sound." Then we're talking about the quality of the sounds instead of what is making the sounds. So another way I've described this before is as if you're trying to explain, we'll use the sound example, explain the sounds to an alien who we're just saying speaks the same language as you, but has no frame of reference for what a door sounds like or what a car sounds like. They don't have those same experiences. They're from a different place, a different planet altogether. They haven't seen these things on TikTok. They have no idea what it is. So then again, you're starting to talk about or define the quality of the sound, like the details of it, instead of what's making the sound. We can translate this to many other experiences. It could be touch. Maybe instead of water, you're feeling warmth. You could say wetness, I guess. Um, Maybe instead of chocolate, you notice like the richness or the sweetness. There's many different types of mindful meditations. They often the ones that are easier to integrate into your day-to-day life if without necessarily setting time aside are things that are bringing awareness to your senses. So again, things like sight, sound, why can't I think of anything else? Taste, touch. Why can't I can have no idea. There's another sense. Anyway, that's not what this podcast is about. Um, so one of the things you can do to incorporate this into your day-to-day life is to start to bring awareness to that while you're doing a task that you have to do anyway. So maybe that's like brushing your teeth. And maybe you start to have a practice of, okay, when I brush my teeth, I'm going to be mindful of the sounds. Or maybe you choose sound and touch. There we go. That's the fifth one. Um, or maybe when you're washing dishes, which is a task that I know a lot of us don't necessarily love. But if you're starting to really bring awareness to, like, where are your hands? What does the water feel like? What's happening, like, visually? What do you see when you're washing the plates? And what is the texture of the cloth? It doesn't have to be a long practice. It can be, 1 minute. Maybe you set a timer for 1 minute, or like I said, 2 minutes for brushing your teeth. Um, a little bit of time to notice what you're seeing around you, what you're noticing. This can be a very grounding practice. It really is bringing you back to this current moment right now. Can be very helpful if you, like me, also think a lot or worry a lot, whether you're worrying about stuff to come or stuff that has happened, and replaying those, awkward moments in your head over and over again. Mindfulness is a really helpful tool for that. And it is one that I practice all the time. It doesn't mean that my brain stopped worrying. It just means that I have a tool when that worrying happens to come back to my body. And most of the time it works. And sometimes it's a bigger thing and I need other tools. So I'm going to recap. Mindfulness is a practice of noticing what is happening in this current moment. We talked about using your five senses to notice your touch, like notice the sensation of touch, of what you're seeing, what you're tasting, what you're feeling. I have to stop listing this out because I keep what you're hearing. Did I say that one? I keep forgetting. I keep forgetting the ones I said already. But it can also be the practice of noticing thoughts. That I would say sometimes is a little bit more, if you're completely new, it's a little easier to start with sensation than it is to start noticing your thoughts. And then we talked about a couple of ways that you can integrate it, like doing dishes, brushing your teeth, and how to do that. There doesn't have to be any length of time. It can be a very short, like 2 breath thing. Some of my favorite things, some of my favorite ways of doing this is noticing breath, the sensation of breath. So when you take a breath in, what movement is happening in your body? Can you feel the temperature of the air in your nose? Can you hear your breath? Maybe if you're in a place that there's smells, like you have a candle or something, like what does it smell like? When you breathe out, what happens in your body? What happens in your rib cage, in your chest, in your belly? Maybe even what happens with pelvic floor, if that feels like a comfortable thing to notice. Does the sound change? Is it the same sound as when you breathe in, or is it something a little bit different? Does the temperature change? That's an easy, like, I'm not going to say necessarily easy. I shouldn't say easy, but that's a really quick little mindfulness exercise that you can do in, like, how long was that? 30 seconds? Um, that you can do basically when you're doing anything. Being like the mindfulness practice of noticing your breath, that's my favorite. I especially like to bring awareness to my rib cage and let my rib cage move as I breathe, and let belly relax so that there can be movement in rib cage as I breathe. Because then I'm allowing for a bigger breath in, which also is a little bit more calming. I like to pay extra attention to exhale so that you're lengthening your exhale a little bit longer than your inhale, which also is extremely grounding. So a couple of little examples then. Let's give a couple examples. So we've done toothbrush, when you're brushing your teeth, when you're doing dishes, you could just take a breath by itself. When you go outside, this time of year, especially when it's starting to become spring, go outside, take a big breath, a mindfulness breath. Notice the sounds, notice the birds, notice maybe it's still cold out, but notice the sun. So good. I can't wait for it to be a little bit warm and to have that first moment of like feeling the sun on your skin. It's such a nice way of practicing mindfulness. You can notice the sounds of the birds and when you're outside. If you're going for a walk, you can notice, like, really, really slow it down and notice your feet on the ground. Maybe you notice the levelness of the ground, whether it moves a little bit, like if it's gravel, if what parts of your feet touch the floor first or touch your sock or your shoes first. You can do a mindfulness practice while you're eating. My favorite way to do that is with chocolate. And with this practice, you might even take it like to the fullest extent if you have a little bit of time and if you really love chocolate, notice the smell of it first without even putting it in your mouth. Just notice the smell. And then look at it, like really look at it and notice the details. Again, like you're trying to explain this experience as vividly as possible to an alien who's has no idea what chocolate is. You're trying to describe the scent, describe the visual, describe the taste when you get to that point, describe the mouth feel to someone who has no idea what chocolate is. So you're getting as detailed as possible. And then, so after you smell it, after you look at it, then you put it in your mouth and you just let it sit there for a little bit. How does it feel? What's the texture like? Then getting into taste. And does it change over time? Does it stay the same? I love this practice. I also love chocolate. So that practice especially is a nice one for me. Um, you can also become mindful while you're practicing movement. Like what's happening in your body? Where are you feeling this movement most? Um, you can become mindful when you're listening to music. Maybe you're really paying attention to the different layers of sound. Um, there's many beautiful ways of practicing, and it's something that you can practice. You don't really need anything to practice. You don't need to even really set time aside to specific. You don't have to like sit down for 10 minutes and do this practice. It's a really, in my opinion, accessible way of practicing of practicing grounding practices. Because meditation is not always accessible. It's not always trauma informed. Sometimes meditating for a long period of time is actually more traumatizing or can bring up trauma. So if you're wanting to practice mindfulness, it might be a little bit more accessible for you to do something like this and, take 2 minutes, notice what it's like when you brush your teeth. If you have any questions, if you have your own mindfulness practice that you want to share, I would love to hear it. Send them to info@movewithbillie.com. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this practice was helpful or this episode was helpful. Um, I would love it if you could rate, review, subscribe, send this episode to anyone you think it's helpful. Maybe save it for when you need to remember what mindfulness is when you're having a hard time and you're like, wait, how do I do that again? You can listen to this episode again. And I'm proud of you. You're doing great. I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.